Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
Let's talk about where we're at. We're at the reading for the seventh day of Pesach, seventh day of Passover. We could have done the eighth day of Passover reading because as Reconstructionists, we only do 7 days of Passover. So early on in the Reconstructionist discussions of common practice, like what we would do, because we're not halachic Jews, we don't follow Jewish law necessarily, but in terms of building out a communal practice, what were the norms, for us as a Reconstructionist set of communities? Mordechai Kaplan and his followers who created the movement decided that now that there was a state of Israel, we should be doing what the state of Israel's doing. Like however they observe in the Jewish state, that's how we should observe. Like it seems silly to have one practice in the land of Israel and then the Jews in the diaspora are doing something else. Once upon a time that made sense because the signifiers had to come to the Sanhedrin. It had to come to the court to declare the new moon. And you counted from then where your festival fell, right? 14 days later was your full moon, was your festival. But we have calendars now that tell us when the new moon is. And in Israel, they never had to add another day because they were right there where the signifiers were lit, right? But it was everybody else. Once you had to travel, once that message had to get to people far away, you weren't sure you were in the right day anymore. So we added days to things, like a second day of Rosh Hashanah, to be sure we're doing it on the right day, right? So we added. So in Israel, they practice what they've always practiced in Israel, 7 days of Chag HaMatzot, is 7 days. If you read Torah, Chag HaMatzot is 7 days. So that was a very long way to say. The Reconstructionist world decided to do the practice of the land of Israel, and so we do 7 days, not 8 days. So you all get to eat pizza or a hamburger with a beer earlier than the rest of the Jewish world. This is one of the benefits of being Reconstructionist. So it's so bad that for me, like every year I get a craving for something. Every year, like there's something. It's just like I can't wait, and it's so bad that this year it's like cereal. Really? Yeah. Wow. That's just croissant, like baguette, I'm just craving. I can't wait to have a bowl of cereal.
I love cereal.
Just like
and the solo cup and the caramel thing.
All right. So we could have done the 8th day of Pesach reading. We could do the 7th day of Pesach reading. So I decided what we're going to do today. I've decided that next year, I think what we're going to do is, because I yell like a Tamara, she does something's coming. What we also read on Pesach is Song of Songs, which is graphic, erotic poetry. Graphic. The rabbis say it is love poetry between Israel and God. Right. It just doesn't get more graphic than the Song of Songs. His fruit hangs in my face. I mean, it's graphic. It's graphic. So, what I'd like to do maybe next time is dig into a little Song of Songs and let's unpack some of that, like stuff that we never really look at and that is it's really yummy stuff. That it's canonized is amazing. I just love that we canonized a really, really erotic text because it's a metaphor. So yeah. Anyway, so I think that's what we're going to do next year. But this year, we're not going to do that. Do we have Bibles? Didn't we bring Bibles? I think we have Bibles.
Go check.
Would you ask Adam? I think we have Bibles that we brought from the sanctuary.
Tamara's got hers.
Tamara's got hers.
Tamara's prepared.
That is not shocking. Look at her. The student. Yeah, right. Rachel's like, yeah, teacher's pet. Yes, so everyone should have Sefaria anyway. You should know how to get to Sefaria anyway, because it is the premier now place to find all Jewish texts that you need in the universe. A lot of rabbis are no longer investing in Sfarim, the actual printed books, because it's all on Sefaria. And you can just print sheets as you need them rather than buy a huge set of books that costs, $600. You use Sefaria. So it's starting to be the norm, actually. So I'm going to share my screen. So the Torah reading for the 7th day of Pesach is not in Leviticus. It is in Exodus. Why? Because that's the story we tell on Pesach, right? Is the Exodus from Egypt. the language for us of redemption from slavery. Redemption is always in Jewish tradition from slavery. It is not redemption from what? What is it not redemption from? Sin.
Sin. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. You'll get the star, even though it was a little late. Pressure buzzer a little quicker next time, please. So yes, so in the reconstructed Jewish tradition that we will call Christianity, in the reconstruction of the Jewish texts and concepts, they reconstructed it that Jesus is the Lamb who died to redeem humanity from sin. We do not have an understanding that there's redemption from sin. We have an understanding there's atonement for sin and forgiveness for sin. There is not redemption from sin. So when we use the language redemption, we are always talking about from slavery. Now we can expand what it means to be enslaved, oppressed, stuck in a narrow place. We can use it as a metaphor for a lot of other things other than the actual Egyptian slavery. But it is always the relationship redemption to this idea of freedom. And what freedom is for is a whole nother conversation, which Bert likes to bring up a lot, right? So not just freedom from, but freedom to. What are our responsibilities? Okay.
379. I opened right to it.
379.
Yeah. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Are you at Exodus 13?
13, 17 to
Yes,
17,
that's
16.
That's it. So, so we are looking at Parshat Bishalach. This part, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. This part of the narrative, it's not the whole narrative, of course, but this is the reading for seventh day Pesach. Vayi b'shalach paro et ha'am. So we know Vayihi and lo, yo, behold, that when Paro sent the nation, the people, remember they got chased out after the death of the firstborn. V'lo nacham Elohim derech eretz plishtim. God did not lead them by the way of the Plishtim, the Philistines, our arch enemy, one of our arch enemies, the Philistine dynasty, Philistine empire, whatever we want to call it, which is why, by the way, when Rome crushed Jerusalem, it was named what?
Palestine. Yeah.
Palestine. Philistinim is from this, right? So that the biggest insult Rome could give to the Jews was to name the land now the name of their arch rival and enemy, the Philistines. Why didn't God lead them by the way of the Philistines? Though it's karovhu, right? It's closer. Ki amar Elohim, because God said, pen yinachem ha'am, because lest the people freak out, bir otam milchama, when they see war, v'shavu mitzrayma, and they'll go back to Egypt. They'll turn back towards, right? So God understands that this people is a fragile, new, weak, underling, used to being subservient, people that does not trust yet its own abilities, and understands that if God puts them in a position right away to face an army, they're going to freak out and it won't be good. So they're going to go a longer way to get to the promised land. But how far away are we from the promised land? About?
Not that far.
Not that far, right?
10-day walk. 10-day walk.
10-day walk. Okay. All right.
However, if you're speed walking, it probably would be 9.5.
Okay. So they're a 10-day journey or so out from the promised land. So even going, so they're going to go the long way, but even if you go the long way, okay, it's maximum, 2 weeks? How long were they there?
40 years.
So, yeah. So we blew it, right? All right. So this is what we're going to spend our time on in the commentary. I know as usual, y'all are going to go, really? Okay. Vaikach Moshe et atzamot Yosef imo, and Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him. Ki hashbea hishbia et bnei Yisrael, because he had made the children of Israel swear an oath. So this repetition of the word hashbea, hishbia, an intensification of this idea of swearing, et bnei Israel, who are we talking about? Who's the he? It's not Moses. The he is Yosef. Yosef made the children of Israel swear, swear, because it's doubled, lemor, saying, Pakod yivkod Elohim etchem, God will truly take notice of you, because we get pakod yivkod, again, this doubling down on the verb. God will take note of you, meaning you will be delivered. Ve'ha'alitem et atzmotai mizeh itchem. And you will take my bones up with you from here. So what we know is that we have a tradition that Yosef made the sons of Israel swear, not his sons. Who are the sons of Israel? The other tribes, right? His brothers. He made his brothers swear to bring his bones up from Egypt, not to leave him there when they were going to be eventually redeemed. And they set out from Sukkot and they camped at Etam at the edge of the Midbar. So the Midbar is not what we see in Lawrence of Arabia. The Midbar is dry enough that it's sort of desert-y, but it can sustain what do you call them? Flocks, sheep, goats, things that it can eat, scrub. So the Midbar is not what we see when we think of the desert as, Lawrence of Arabia or Eilat. It's not. It can sustain life. All right. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh walked before them or went before them. Yomam ba'amud anan, in the day in a pillar of cloud, right, to lead them on the way. V'layla ba'amud esh, and at night in a pillar of fire to light for them the way to go day and night. They would not retire the column of cloud by day or the column of fire by night from people. I have no idea like that. What is your translation? What is the women's commentary? Verse 22.
The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the feast. It says.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. They're translate. This one's translating Yamish as retire. So it didn't leave them, right? Day or night, right? Either one of those things. Okay. All right. So what are we going to do with this whole Yosef business? Why am I focusing on Yosef? We like him. Tell us why we like him.
Go, Joseph, you know what they say.
Hey, Joseph, you'll make it someday. Shalala, Joseph, you're doing fine. So some of us know Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, obviously.
Sorry.
I told my Hebrew Academy friends we have a WhatsApp group, and they were talking about our fourth grade play, that one of them just found the costume from our fourth grade play, which was Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And I put on the WhatsApp, yes, my people know that for at least 4 weeks of Genesis, there's going to be at some point, I'm going to break into song as we're studying the Joseph novella. It's just, I can't resist. All right. So tell me, Robin, why we like it. Why do we like him? Yeah, Joseph. Okay. Right.
Later on, when his brothers came with their father, because they were starving, he helped them, gave them, and took care of them, and they didn't really even recognize him,
right? Because
he was dressed so royally,
Egyptian-y,
whatever that was.
Right, whatever that is.
And he was a kind soul.
Okay. So what Robin is alluding to is where the rabbis go, that Yosef could have exacted revenge. He chose not to, because he now had a relationship with Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh that had him feel like he had a different set of obligations than just whatever he wanted to do, right? That somehow he understands that. We don't get it spelled out for us in the text, but he says it's God who put me in this so that I could help you. So that's his understanding of his responsibility. It didn't have to go that way. Now, some of us, some years, look at Joseph and go, seriously, dude, like he tortured, right, the brothers by locking up Benjamin. He never bothered to tell dad all those years that he was alive. He let dad think he was dead, right? I mean, so he ain't a saint, but the rabbis really see Yosef as someone who could have acted one way, but was a man of faith and did not, because of his faith. Okay? Every human being is complicated. Everybody, absolutely.
Amen.
Okay, so here's our text. Oh, sorry, no. We're going to look at Genesis. We just read the text about the swearing, right? But if you go to Genesis 50, oh wait, I have sheets. I forgot. I had to make physical sheets because you're here in physical form, you people. So people are talking about Joseph, the queer icon. Yes, he is. He is. He's called beautiful. He is called what women are called in the Bible. And he's
Love this. Yeah.
yeah, so he's very much considered, yes. Anyway, okay. And then and a lot of the queer community talks about Joseph coming out to his brothers, right? So that there's a parallel, thing of truly coming out with his true identity and how difficult that is for him and complicated and all. Okay. So Joseph in Genesis 50, we have this pasuk, we have this verse. And Yosef took an oath of the children of Israel saying, so we're going backwards. Right now we just got a reference that Joseph had caused the children of Israel to swear. Now here's where it happens. In Genesis, Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel saying, God will surely remember you and you will carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died being 110 years old and they embalmed him. And he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Okay. So they embalmed him. He was put in a sarcophagus, like was the Egyptian custom, like he was mummified. Okay. That's what was done, right, in Egypt. And he was like royalty in Egypt. And so he had the Egyptian custom done when he died. And of course, that meant his body would be preserved. And so he could say, take it with you when you go, because it'll be mummified. So then we have Exodus 13 that we just read. And Moshe took the bones of Joseph, for he had sworn, right? And now we get the doubling down, surely sworn, the children of Israel saying, God will surely remember you and you will carry up my bones away with you. So this is an old tradition that we get it from Genesis and it's recounted in Exodus. The swearing of Joseph's brothers taking his bones out of there. Now, another text we don't look at very often, Joshua. Usually we stop at Deuteronomy. So on your source sheet, the next source is Joshua 24, Joshua 24. And the bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel brought up out of Egypt, buried them in Shechem, in the parcel of ground which Jacob bought of the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. And they became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. All right. Usually we don't read Joshua, so we don't get to where they actually buried those bones. They just carried them with them all through the desert. But if you look at Joshua, they've come into the land. Where do they bury Joseph? They bury him in Shechem. Okay? Rashi says, what we learn from this, remember, whenever you're reading Rashi, you have to ask, what's Rashi's problem? Rashi's very straightforward. He's always trying to explain an issue with the text, something that seems unclear. So what's Rashi's issue? If you've begun a commandment, be sure to finish it. For only the one who finishes it gets the credit, as it is written. The children of Israel buried the bones of Joseph, which they had brought up from Egypt in Shechem. But didn't Moses bring the bones up from Egypt? Rather, this teaches us that because he did not manage to finish the commandment of burying Joseph, the children of Israel did it. And that's why it says the children of Israel brought up the bones. All right, so what's Rashi's problem? Rashi's problem is, wait a minute, how can you say the children of Israel brought up the bones, which we just saw in Joshua. The bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel brought up from Egypt. Rashi has a problem because that contradicts. Moshe brought them up. We just saw in Exodus, Moshe brought them up. So Rashi has a problem. The text doesn't match. That can't be, God forbid. Was it Moses or was it the brothers or the people of Israel? And so Rashi says, we learn from this, God forbid you should think there's a contradiction. Moshe started it, but if you start something, you better finish it because it's going to be in the name of the person who. So that's how he deals with this apparent contradiction. We can't be dealing with a real contradiction, God forbid. Right? The Ein Yaakov in Sota says, but how did Moses know where Joseph was buried? Right? Joseph's a long time ago. By the time we get to Moshe, how long have they been enslaved?
400 years.
400 years. So how did Moshe know where to find Joseph's sarcophagus? Now we're going to get a story. Like whenever we're going to get that question, now we're going to get a midrash. We're going to get a story. All right. So it was said, so this is a thing, right? It was said that Serach, Bat Asher, we studied her one year. You can look for the year we studied her in the women's Passover celebration. We studied who was Serach, Bat Asher. She was of the previous generation, and to her Moses went and asked whether she knew where Joseph was buried. And she said, an iron casket was made by the Egyptians, because remember, he was a powerful guy in Egypt, wherein he was placed and sunk in the river Nile, so that the water of the Nile should be blessed through him. So for Egypt, he saved Egypt from famine. So Joseph was a hero to the Egyptians, is what this is saying. So they sunk his sarcophagus in the Nile so that his body should be in the Nile and the waters of the Nile should be blessed through his presence in the Nile. How do crops grow in Egypt?
The flooding of Nile.
The flooding of the Nile. So it makes complete sense that this is a legend that grows up, right? That it's so that the Nile should overflow, so that they should have food, so that the water of the Nile should be blessed through him. Okay. Thereupon Moshe went to the brink of the Nile. I mean, he can't search the Nile. So how does it help him to know that it's sunk in the Nile? What's he going to do? Hire a diving team? Like, that's not real helpful, Serach Bat Asher. Thank you for the info and the intel, but, right? So there has to be a way that he finds it. Thereupon Moshe went to the brink of the Nile and said, Yosef, the time which the Holy One, praised be God, gave an oath to redeem Israel has expired. The oath with which you have adjured Israel is now to be fulfilled. If you will reveal yourself, wonderful. But if not, then we shall be free from the obligation of your oath. And immediately the casket of Joseph floated to the top of the water.
That's an ultimatum.
So we committed to taking your bones out of here. I know we're obligated by that oath, but I can't find you. And I don't have a scuba outfit. So you have to decide how the time of slavery is ended. Like you said to your brothers, there will come a time where God will take note of you and you will be redeemed. Okay, so it's happening now. If you really want your bones to come out of Egypt, you need to help me find you. And if not, that's fine. But then we can't be held to an oath that we can't fulfill. This is our crazy truth, right? That these are the questions they ask and these are the answers. It's a very crazy tradition, but it's kind of fun, right? It's kind of fun.
How did Sarah, if Moses didn't know because it was 400 years later, how did Sarah?
Sarah is believed to have been given a blessing by Yaakov of almost immortality. So she lived long enough for Moshe to ask her.
But she was 360 or 70 years old.
Yes.
Good memory.
Right? Really good memory. Really good memory. So Sforno, what is Sforno going to say on these words? Hashbeat, Hishbeat, and on the swearing, for sure, swearing words. Any obligation undertaken communally must be honored by the leader of that community when the time and the opportunity presents itself to discharge that obligation. What's Sforno's problem? Why is Sforno bringing this commentary on these two words, swearing they swore? Because we can't have redundancy in Torah, right? There cannot be redundancy in Torah. God doesn't meet God's. So Sforno's coming to say, why do we have this swearing word twice? It was sworn once, but then Moshe was obligated by the swearing because they couldn't fulfill it. He had to. He was the leader of the community, and if the community swears something, meaning they swore it 400 years ago, but they couldn't fulfill it because they were in slavery, then when the opportunity arises, the leader of the community is obligated to fulfill oath. So this is about leadership, and this is about honoring the promises of the past, right? And that leaders have to honor the promises of the past. So, I think about our promises to Native peoples, right? How good were we at keeping those?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I have sort of been learning about this in a separate and about reclaiming ancestral, there's a lot of U.S. Land Department, and ancient native burial grounds are kind of needing to be reclaimed by the tribes, which still keep track of where the ancestors are buried. And this is resonating for me a lot right now with that awareness. So was there not a tradition, but is there something connected to that being part of the culture of the ancient Near East as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So this is
a very serious attachment.
Okay.
The first thing Abraham does when he is in Canaan, what is the first thing he does? He buys a burial site for the family.
Okay.
He buys a cave where the whole family will be buried, because that was seriously important, was to have a place where you could have the body rot That's a terrible word.
Well, it was
Decay, and then collect the bones
Yeah.
and bury secondary burial in the floor. And that was a sacred
Yeah.
obligation, and it was a sacred site.
And I think about keeping the spirit, and I think we'll get to this. I don't want to jump ahead, but some of the same commentary in the secular world has been, yes, that the spirit of the body needs to be with its native nature, basically. So when they're not connected, there is a conflict or war and that at rest. So this was just activating that thought.
Good.
Okay.
So hold this thought about disturbing burial grounds, because there's a commentary that's going to ask something about that. Okay. The Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael, that commentary says, and Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him. This apprises us of the wisdom and saintliness of Moshe. All of Israel were occupying themselves with the spoils of Egypt. Moshe was occupying himself with the mitzvah of the bones of Joseph. So what do you mean? What were they doing? Occupying themselves? What's that about? Doing bad things, as usual. Robin has such incredible esteem for the Jewish people.
Weren't they? Does that refer to the things that the Israelites were, quote, borrowing?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
They were plundering the Egyptians on their way out. Remember, they were asking to borrow gold, silver, jewels, precious stones, right? So that's what what the Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael is coming to say is, Moshe, it's not just that he fulfilled the obligation. Moshe was so machmir and so good that when everybody else was busy, plundering the Egyptians, what Moshe's concern was going to find the bones of their ancestors. Mm-hmm.
This reminds me of the mitzvah of Kaddish. He was doing something he could never be thanked.
Yes. All right. I love this one. Shnei Lichot Habrit. I love this commentary, which I've never heard before. The word for bones in Hebrew has the same root as the word for essence, etzem. The Torah's report then has a dual meaning. Specifically, Moshe took Joseph's essence with the Jewish people when they left Egypt. Having acquired Joseph's essence, Moshe was later able to give the Jewish people Torah.
Connected. Thank you.
So to that point of, it's not just bones. Mm-hmm. Moshe understood that what he was carrying was the essence of Yosef. That's what the bones provide, mm-hmm. or provide, but
carry or sustain,
convey, right? And so Moshe being able to connect to the actual essence of Yosef, who saved, his people, his family, saved, Egypt. Moshe is able in that sense to acquire the etzem of Yosef and save the people by giving them. Beautiful commentary on this idea of the bones are not just bones, it is about essence. Mm-hmm. Now in Sotah, what do we get in Sotah? Moshe zacha ba'atzamot Yosef. Moshe, there's a word in Hebrew, zacha, which is an English translation that is, close, is merited, but it's a very powerful concept for the rabbis. Zechut, having the privilege or the honor to merit doing something.
You say the word?
Zechut. We are supposed to dan lekaf zechut. We are supposed to judge to the side of merit. So if somebody says something in a text and you're like, what was that? Then you're supposed to dan lekaf zechut. Judge it to the side of merit. Assume the best of people, right? So zechut, merit. All right. So Sotah is bringing that concept here about Moshe, that Moshe had the zechut to transport Joseph's bones. It was an honor, a privilege, not just an obligation, right? The rabbis understand that he had the zechut to take the bones of Yosef to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, to bury him in Israel. And there was none among the people greater than Moshe, as we know. And Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him. Who had greater burial than Moshe, as no one involved himself in his burial other than the omnipresent God self? How do we know that? They always have, remember the game. If you're going to make a claim, what's the game? You have to bring a proof text. So they're claiming God buried Moshe. How do we know this? Well, you have to bring a quote from Torah. So we have a quote from Torah, right? And what is it? Vayikbor oto bagai. And he buried him in the valley. Moshe was alone when he died. So who's the he? He buried him can only be for the rabbis referring to the Holy One, blessed be God. God's self buried Moshe. That's how saintly Moshe was, that God took upon God's self the sacred obligation to bury Moshe, not to leave it to other humans. God loved Moshe so much that God buries Moshe himself, say the rabbis. All right. So we know that from Torah. We just got the quote. We got the proof text. Okay, check the box. And nobody knows where he's buried to this day. The Mishnah comments, not only with regard to Moshe did the sages say that God takes part in his burial, but also with regard to all the righteous individuals. We have to have a proof text. Where's your proof? If you're going to make that claim, where's your proof that God participates in the burial of all righteous people? Look at Isaiah 58:8, of course. Your righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of God shall gather you in. Gathering in, they're bringing it as a proof text. God will bring in the righteous. Bringing in is a euphemism often for dying. You'll be gathered into your ancestors. You'll sleep with your ancestors. And so it's a beautiful, purposeful misreading of Isaiah to use it as a proof that God participates in the burial of all righteous, right? Which for me, one of the reasons I really liked this was we are such a tradition that honors death, not in the way of glorifying death, the way Egypt did, right? Everything was for the afterlife, not glorifying death, but honoring people who have died and honoring what it means to care for them. Like here we're talking about the bones, but if you think about it, we take such care as a tradition with the body. Traditionally, the body's not left alone ever, right? And in a Jewish mortuary, someone is paid to sit and daven Tehillim, to recite Psalms 24 hours a day with the bodies. The body's never left alone until it is buried. I served on a Chevra Kadisha, which is a committee that volunteers to prepare bodies for burial in the traditional Jewish fashion of washing the bodies. We are taught on a Chevra Kadisha, you speak to the body. Anytime you do something, you ask, I'm sorry, I'm going to now, Bob, turn you over. We're going to wash your back, and you don't talk. There's no crosstalk. There's no conversation other than speaking to the deceased and kind of explaining what you're doing. We're now going to put you in tachrichim, in the shroud. Please excuse me, I need to lift your left arm. It's that kind of respect, I guess I'm saying, and care for the physical remains of who we are that is so important in Jewish tradition. It's why we don't embalm. We want the body to return to the earth. We don't want to preserve. It's considered indecent to see someone after they've died unless you're preparing them for burial. That's why we have closed caskets, because they don't get control over who sees them or who touches them and who kisses them. Someone they hated in life can come kiss them at the casket and look, all saintly and whatever. Like, no, I don't get control over it. No. You remember them as they were when they were alive, and you honor their body when they die. Okay. So it really stuck out to me how long this has been back to what you were saying, like, back to when, it's really old, this instinct for us to really honor the remains of a person. Rashi says they buried it in Shechem. And so what's Rashi's problem? Why Shechem, right? Why not Jerusalem? Why not, right? Like, you have to always ask, what's Rashi's problem? Rashi's problem is why Shechem? And now he's going to answer. From Shechem, he was kidnapped, and to Shechem they returned. So Rashi's saying, bringing his bones back was about making restitution for the original crime. They weren't absolved of the original crime until they took his bones and put them back from where they. So why do I like this one? Because I don't bring you ones I don't like, obviously. I like this one because I feel like it says we have obligations to continue to try to rectify things that were done even before our time. Going back to this idea of, indigenous peoples and, indigeneity is a whole nother conversation. People say it's a construct. Nobody's indigenous unless we're talking about Africa, right? Nobody's indigenous anymore, but whatever. But let's just pretend for a minute indigeneity is a thing. I think about that a lot as an American, right? That I have obligations that I have to continue to try to rectify things that I didn't do it, but my ancestors did it. And there were oaths sworn, and there were agreements made, and there were pacts signed, and there were treaties made, and we've done a terrible job, right, of honoring those and whatever. So, and we've abrogated them, forget honoring. And so I feel like this is a very old instinct in Jewish tradition. I mean, this is Rashi saying that's why he had to be buried in Shem and not Dafka, Jerusalem, the holy big place, of the temple. No, we have to always do what we can to rectify the sins. We can't always, but I love this point by Rashi. I really love it. All right. So now we're going to look at Joshua 24. Joshua assembled all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. Now remember, there's no reason for you to know this. If we'd studied this, I would expect you to remember, but we didn't. Shechem becomes a rival cult site to Jerusalem. Shechem rivals Jerusalem. The Mishkan was at Shechem. The ark was at Shechem. Who brings it down from Shechem with a great big ceremony, wearing only a loincloth?
Wasn't it David?
Yes. Extra points for Bert. Yes. King David brings the ark from Shechem to where? To Jerusalem, because he is making his capital in Jerusalem. The temple he wants to be built in Jerusalem because it is central to the northern and southern. He's uniting the country, north and south. They were not united. David unites them. Okay. So he's going to make this a new empire, a new country, a new thing, a new kingdom of Israel. And so he unites them. That means he needs to move the center of gravity from Shechem to Jerusalem. But Shechem stays a really important cult site. So you can understand why Rashi's a little nervous. What do you mean they buried him in Shechem? What are you talking about? Right? Like, can't be. So, but now what do we get in Joshua? Joshua assembles all the tribes of Israel where? At Shechem. It is a sacred site before Jerusalem. Shechem is a sacred site in Israel long before. So he summoned, and this is a very old memory. Like, this is a very old memory. It's happening at Shechem. He summons Israel's elders and commanders, magistrates and officers, and they presented themselves before God. Now Joshua recounts in front of all of them the history of Israel, beginning with Avraham. I didn't bring all that because it's a lot. And Yisrael, meaning Jacob, served God during the lifetime of Joshua and the lifetime of the elder. This is not Jacob. This is the people. Served God during the lifetime of Joshua and the lifetime of the elders who lived on after Joshua and who had experienced all the deeds that God had wrought for Israel, meaning in helping them conquer the promised land. The bones of Yosef, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem in the piece of ground that Yaakov had bought for 100 kesitas from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, and which had become a heritage of the Josephites. So we get in the book of Joshua also that he's buried at Shechem, that the bones are buried at Shechem. And we get from Sotah, during all the years in the wilderness, the two arks traveled together, the Ark of the Covenant and the ark containing the bones of Yosef. And people would ask, how is it proper for the ark of a dead man to be borne alongside the ark of the divine presence? And they were answered, he who lies in one ark fulfilled all of the words written in the other ark. All right. So the question is, how can it be that they were carrying a coffin, right? Because it does contaminate. It does convey impurity, remember? So how could they have been carrying the remains of Joseph next to the holiest thing they had? And so they have this idea that because what's in this ark really brought to life everything that's in, because he was so righteous, right, that it was an honor to have his bones accompany the Ark of the Pact, because Joseph was somebody who fulfilled everything that's in the Ark of the Pact. All right. I don't usually bring Christian commentary, but I kind of liked this. So this is Christian commentary. You don't even want to know how I got there, but okay. So the Bible records that before Joseph died, he made his brothers promise to take his bones out of Egypt and into Canaan, shift them from a land of slavery to a land of freedom. Lie them not in the land where promises are being waited for, but where they are fulfilled. Take them where winter turns to spring. Joseph was a die-hard dreamer. He saw possibilities in the bleakest of seasons. He always held out for whatever God had told him, even if his dead, dry bones had to be carried by someone else to see it happen. He was expectant as expectant gets. Moses understood that. To Joseph, these bones were symbolic of the indestructible life Now, of course, this is Christian, so what word are we going to get here? Joseph longed for resurrection. What would we say? Redemption, right? Compensation and faithful fulfillment of God's promises. His bones went all over the desert with God's people for all of their 40 years traveling. Anyways, to me, and this is part of what I liked about this, spring is all about resurrection, the holding of the Lord to his promises. It is all about the land being filled with new beauty. It is us being filled with the Holy Spirit and expectation. It is a time to put away sadness and strife and to enter into daily goodness and hopes for tomorrow. It is about new births and harvests and receiving that for which has been long awaited. This poem embraces, the person goes on to write a poem about Joseph's. This poem embraces the celebration of winter's end, new beginnings, and eager participation in readying ourselves for marriage with Christ. A whole future of new possibilities is right here. Expectations get sharpened. Light comes streaming back in after a long season of night. I call the poems Joseph's bones because we who live today are still metaphorically carrying our own bones of promises yet to be fulfilled. And springtime is when we are reminded of those first buds of hope reemerge. And right now, I just feel like that was some appropriate teaching for where we are as a world community, as a nation. Felt like, yeah, we need bones with us to remind us that it may take a really long time, but we have to keep hope that promises will be from dreams and come true, and all that Josephy kind of stuff. This is a queer commentary by Rabbi Jill Hammer. This exacted oath is especially poignant when we realize that Joseph has spent his entire life being raised and lowered. This is what I was saying, Margot, about. You'll see. He is elevated above his brothers, then thrown into a pit. He's made head slave of an official's household, then thrown into prison, then suddenly made viceroy over Egypt. The burial and raising of his bones is one more reminder that Joseph is a symbol of the circle of life and death, victory and defeat, despair and redemption. Here's a Jewish commentary. Right? Like the grain he stores to feed the hungry, Joseph is cut down and replanted again and again. But why does he need to do it one last time? Why does he want his bones disturbed? The bones of Joseph represent memory. By insisting that he be buried in the land of Israel, not immediately but generations later, Joseph forces his descendants to remember their promise over time, and thus to remember their identity. Only by remembering can they one day be free. I know that he will come to light again, as he always does. The man as beautiful as Rachel can be hidden, but he can't be forgotten. So too, I pray that all my ancestors will one day show us their bones, right? And this from Rabbanit Amelia Haas. We are all sometimes beset by challenges outside of our vision and reach and buried deep within us. Our aim then must be twofold. We must be like Moshe, calm and present, fulfilling our obligations and setting limits when needed. And we must be like Yosef, present in our bones, right? Back to that idea of etzem, essence in our bones, and lifting ourselves up to act for our people and our world when it really counts. Then, God willing, we too will pass on the Torah Hashem, the essence of our nation, to our children's children. We will merit that it be said of us, that we recognize the devotion and sacrifices of our ancestors and bring them forward with us. In those moments, we will carry forth the ark of our past, along with the ark of hope for us. Yummy stuff. You see how I got caught in the incredible rabbit hole of like a very obscure verse, but that's the beauty of Torah, right? That's our beauty of having a tradition that keeps going back to these texts and purposefully rereading them and reconstructing. So Torah Queries is a great commentary on Torah. It is queer commentary on the Torah. The other one is a book called Queering the Torah. So anyone interested in queer commentary, Queering the Torah is another really great. Yes, Judith.
Today, I'm honoring the yahrzeit of my father and my daughter. And it is such an important message that came today in the Torah portion. It could not have been more perfect. Thank you so much.
Remembering those on whose shoulders we stand. And that we can't be free unless we remember. I love that too. I love that teaching that we're not free unless we remember. So often in therapy, which I respect, I would not be sitting here if it were not for great therapists, seriously, who had great patience and hope. But so often we talk about freedom being about letting go of remembering, right? And Judaism is so antithetical to that idea, right? It's about what we choose to focus on remembering. But remembering is identity. Remembering is freedom. We don't have real freedom without remembering.
That's the psychoanalysis.
So, I think that's just a beautiful teaching. Of course, my father's yard site is also Pesach. My father died second Seder. So, yeah.
I feel like remembrance, like personally, I just feel like so, like it just, when you're like, oh, what do I reach for? But you have that history and like just all of our stories, everything that we have. I'm like, yes, like that pops me up so much. So I just want to say that out loud.
And that we can claim our identity.
Yeah.
Meaning the therapeutic model is right. We're stuck, right, in being defined by what's happened to us. I just feel like we always need the complement of the Jewish tradition against our enlightened Western culture as well, to say both and.
Mm-hmm.
We also need to claim what we want to from our ancestors, right? I was not born Jewish. I claim my identity from these ancestors.
Me too.
I claim this as my identity, right? I claim their story. I claim being their, progeny.
Yes.
And we get to claim that. We get to choose, in some ways, our identity, right?
Amen. Absolutely.
And
remember its essence.
Yes.
Not, it's beyond the things that we do, but they're the essence that drove them to do what they do.
Absolutely. And that what did you just say? What did you start with?
The essence.
What we're claiming is the essence, right?
Yeah.
I lost something. Okay, Rachel.
I was following that.
I know, but it made me
Yeah.
think of something that I can't.
Being the Star Trek fan that you are, in the Wrath of Khan, and when Spock goes in and to condemn, but before he goes in, he goes to McCoy and he says, "Remember,"
Preach.
and he carried, which then led to Spock's essence in McCoy in, the Search of Spock. The next
science fiction is Torah. I got it back. So what I was going to say, and then Rachel, I'll call on you. But what I was going to say is when you said remember was about the essence, not just because what is the opposite of remember? Dismember. To remember is to do the opposite of dismember, right? It's to put it back together, right? It's about the essence, right? Of when we remember, it's about, but it's, again, Rachel.
Thank you. This made me think of things I've been reading about lately, because I have to talk clients down from the trees a lot. And so one of the problems that they've been having lately with everything going on, politically and because they are really struggling with, so much happening right now, and tariffs and, trade wars and, scary things with immigration and all the rest of it. And one of the problems, and where it helps being Jewish, I think, and knowing history, is they've never seen these things in their lifetime. So like living memory and history are the same thing to them, and neither one resonates. And so like we'd never had a global pandemic, except we had, but it was 100 years ago. We have never had a trade war except for the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. But again, that was 100 years ago. So there's all of these ways in which there's history is relevant and can be relevant. And we can look back on periods of time in this country where we can take from that experience. I mean, once you kind of approach somebody with empathy and say, yes, I understand the way you feel and it's okay. And we're all scared right now, and can get them off of the ledge. But no one remembers anything and no one studies history. Americans are so future oriented. Americans in general, we come here, we leave, unless we've been forced here on slave ships. We come here because we're leaving the past behind. We're leaving it behind. We're saying, I don't want to think about that place I left because it wasn't great. It was terrible. I'm leaving that. I'm reinventing myself and my family. And we come here and we forget the past. And that can have benefits. It can make us innovative and hard workers and all the rest. But in a terrible way, it means that we know nothing of even living memory or history or anything else. And so when it can be valuable to us to be able to look back, it means we never repent. We never do teshuvah for our past sins. We never, ever go back and look back at the past and say, we did something wrong. we need to go back and look at that. And so I think that's where being Jewish is so valuable, because
I wish you would type that up and send it to me, because I think it's it's an argument for why some of us engage with a tradition, right? It's because what we do by remembering these stories, because we read ourselves into these stories, right? We don't say, okay, it happened a long time ago. We're just looking at the facts. We're saying, what does it teach us? What does it say to us now? Because what you're saying is we're putting ourselves in history, so we carry the lessons of those memories forward, and it can inform in really important ways with deep wisdom of, that has survived calamities, celebrations, thousands of years of being kicked out of everywhere and hunted down and murdered and whatever, and building and rebuilding and building something else, and then arguing with the past and arguing with, so there's so much wisdom there that you're right, that Americans have such a short memory, and you're right, it's very forward-looking, and it's also very individual. It's about my success, my family's success, right? Whereas we tend to be communitarian. And these stories are communitarian stories. It's the story of our people. Not just
the only history we look at in this country is when we think about our mythology of being, Americans, North Americans, and that's mythology, and that's different. And if we only take the good, shiny stuff from it, and we don't really dig into it and say, but there was a dark side to it, then we're not really gleaning anything valuable.
Both are important. Susan? Thank you, Rachel. Beautifully.
I just, first of all, Rachel, all your comments have just been brilliant, and I really love them. But I want to say that, in a way, I'm a born-again Jew, because when I was raised High German Reform, and then in my later adulthood, the regressive genetics came out and showed that the Kohanim of today are actually the direct descendants of the Kohanim of the Temple. And although I'm only a Kohen by marriage, all of a sudden I had this huge moment of revelation, and I thought, no, it's not just words. Every day I say, God of my ancestors. I actually mean it. These people were my ancestors. And that's when I went into deeper study.
Robin?
I've been in Africa, and when I was there, maybe 10 years ago, I felt like I had been there before. Mm-hmm. I had this incredible feeling like, oh my God, my ancestors were here, I was here. And when I got back to our country, it was like a 17-hour trip. I wanted to get back on the plane and go back there. It was calling to me. And that's far. That's like a long time ago, but I felt
Robin,
so strongly.
I've heard that.
Yes.
You have? Yes. So it's not only me.
I studied anthropology.
Yes.
Once I started really studying anthropology, this story, I know I'm going to sound crazy. It's all right, but you love me anyway, right? I know it sounds crazy. I think this story is about coming out of Africa. I think this story is that old. I think this is a story of leaving. Egypt is where?
In Africa.
I think this is a story about leaving. That we have.
I know.
We have what you just described. We have a memory somewhere really deep in ourselves of leaving Africa. And that's a huge journey. And I know I'm not trying to make it about slavery. I'm saying I think there is a very, very basic cellular memory of an exodus, and that when you landed, or when you were there, you were like, oh right, my cells know, my bones know where I am. They recognize this place. I think it's absolutely 100%.
This is being studied now, in the gene world, and so now all of the history sciences are starting to talk to one another in the way that, either land science or genetics or like the evolutionary theories are being changed now that we can actually use gene mutation to understand how human groups have migrated, survived, etc. And what you are saying blows my mind that having a spiritual and soulful experience to know but I can't prove it because I have no physical evidence to give that story. Right. But to have it being reconstructed is,
from the DNA on the X chromosome.
the ladies, mamas.
Right? It's from the maternal DNA that we are learning a lot of stuff. So it's because that goes, I mean, I forget all the specifics of it.
George has something.
Sorry, George, speak.
Yes, I am unmuted. Yeah, I think that the remembrance and the hope from the remembrance is absolutely terrific. But in the beginning of the discussion, we really talked about the sins of the father upon the kids, and we should remember the history and the problems that were created with the American Indians, etc. But it's not a sin for us. For us, it should be a challenge and end up with the great hope that many of us have talked about. But I did want to really mention that the sins of the father are not our sins, but it is a chance to correct and to hope.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying. In case I misspoke, in case anyone heard something different, I am not suggesting this is about sin, just so we're clear. And so if I misspoke, I apologize. What I'm saying is there are obligations that we inherit that are not obligations we made. That's all I'm suggesting, is that, that this is a story about leaning into the obligations that came before us, and that we are not excused from trying to fulfill them if our ancestors swore them, if that makes any sense. That's all I was trying to say. If I use a confusing way, I'm sorry. Okay.
In response to Robin, I was in Africa less than a year ago, and I have to say I have never felt more at home or comfortable. I did not feel the same thing you did, but I thought this place is life. It's so full of life. And my graduate degree is in African studies because I had that same drawing to Africa. It's a powerful, powerful experience to be there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I make another comment that these wonderful feelings I felt when I went to Israel.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Just a magnificent feeling of freedom. And
one of the oldest places to be inhabited after we came out of Africa.
Yes.
The Fertile Crescent. Hey, that's where people went out of Africa. Alex?
I think that, what you're saying about not framing it in sin, but it's like it really embodies Exodus to me, which is just this power of remembrance as a responsibility for how we shape our lives and just how we move forward. So it's just the remembering, and why looking back at history is so important, as people were saying. And, as far as reparations and giving back land, that's a whole nother issue. But it's true. It's like, how much do we take responsibility for our ancestors, or is really just the responsibility in the remembering and using that remembrance to influence how we move through our own lives.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.